It was 6 p.m. on May 25th, 1992, and Marilee So was among the 70% of Filipinos watching the Channel 2 evening news. Pepsi was about to announce the winning number in a promotion that had gripped the Philippines' 65 million people. The promotion was, each bottle of Pepsi had a special number under the cap, like the lottery. If your number was called, you had a chance to win prizes. Across the Philippines' 7,641 islands, ads had promised people you could be a millionaire.
Look for the winning number in sari-sari stores every day, also on TV, radio, and newspapers. You could be a millionaire.
A million pesos, about $68,000 in today's dollars, was the largest prize available, 611 times the country's average monthly salary at the time. The published odds of winning that amount were 28.8 million to 1. After a successful U.S. rollout, Pepsi-Cola International CEO Christopher Sinclair made it part of his strategy to fight Coca-Cola abroad. Visiting 77 countries in 6 months, he was dismayed to find the world's grocery aisles awash with Coca-Cola Red. Pepsi hired a Mexican company to bring number fever to Argentina, Chile, Guatemala, Mexico, and the Philippines, where it truly caught fire. Monthly sales there quickly jumped from $10 million to $14 million, and its market share from 19.4% to 24.9%. That night, Marilee So murmured a prayer as the million peso number was called, 349. Her prayer had been answered. The couple danced and laughed. They won $1 million pesos. What they didn't know was in the Philippines, 800,000 other people had the winning number 349. A misprint in production caused 800,000 bottles of Pepsi to have the winning number, meaning 800,000 people thought that they were rich. By 3 a.m., an emergency meeting between Pepsi executives was held to work out a compromise where the misprint bottle caps could be exchanged for a 500 peso, aka $18, consolation prize. A group of protesters were not appeased. They soon went by the name of the 349 Coalition and held protests outside Pepsi plants. When reporters asked their cause, one man explained, "It's about third world countries being exploited by multinationals." Days turned into weeks, turned into months, with individuals throwing Molotov cocktails and grenades at Pepsi warehouses and trucks. 5 people ended up dying, another 12 were injured, and Pepsi ended up paying $10 million in damages. What started as a lottery game burst into civil unrest in response to decades of colonization, broken elections, and an economic system that promised them dreams but did not deliver. This Pepsi number fever represented globalization. Welcome everyone to our 10th and final economics lecture, Globalization and You. We will be looking at how the health of our economy is measured, what is globalization, why it matters, pros and cons, and of course, what power do you have as consumers? This whole year, we talked about our nation without much attention to the other 248 nations watching us. But we are being watched, and what goes on here? The smallest purchase of some bubblegum in the checkout line ends up impacting the ecosystem of another country. While not any one of us should carry the responsibility of a whole government or corporation, I do think we often isolate ourselves into believing we're on our own. When we discuss economics as a series of choices with trade-offs, another question we should ask is, how are my choices impacting the world? So first, how is our economy measured? For review, an economy is the system we use to make choices involving what to produce and how it's distributed. In the United States, we measure our economy through 3 different factors. The first being the gross domestic product, aka the GDP.
GDP is an important gauge of the overall health of an economy. It stands for Gross Domestic Product. Simply put, GDP measures the total value of all goods and services in a country.
That means it measures a lot of stuff worth a lot of money. Here in the UK, GDP is around $2.5 trillion per year. In the United States, the world's biggest economy, it's around $19 trillion every year.
Our GDP is the money value of all goods and services produced in the United States over the course of a year. A simple way to look at this is theoretically, what if the US only produced two goods, wheat and steel? If in 2020, the sum money value of all wheat products was $40 million and the sum money value of all steel products was $100 million, the 2020 GDP of the simple economy would be $140 million. Now, our GDP is made up of government spending, business investments, personal consumptions, and exports minus imports to a total of $20 trillion. The more important part here is the growth rate. So in the simple example earlier, if wheat production doubled but steel production remained constant this year, the GDP for 2021 would be $180 million. Economic growth from 2020 to 2021 in terms of GDP is roughly 28%. In reality, the average growth rate is 2%, which is around $400 billion. Having a growth rate of 2% is an indicator of a healthy economy. It means that our production of items continue at a steady rate and are priced at a steady rate. But look at the growth rate as a temperature. If it's too low, that is the sign of an economic recession, and if it's too high, that is the sign of a bubble. The second quarter of our GDP in 2020 was negative 30% because of the national shutdown. All production stopped in a way we haven't seen since the Great Depression. The third quarter was up 30%, but in all, our GDP growth for 2020 was negative 3%. Indicating that we're currently in a recession. Now, there are a few limitations of our GDP. One, it leaves out unpaid household and volunteer work. So production of goods and services can be happening, but it's based on volunteer basis. No one is giving that work money value. It also ignores any informal or illegal exchanges, such as babysitting and drug sales. It also does not indicate income distribution, meaning while you might hear that the economy is doing well and the main indicator is the GDP, it means nothing for your wallet. There could be no change for you personally at all. Yet, there is a correlation between a nation's high GDP and higher literacy rates, higher life expectancy, and higher standards of living. This goes into our second measure of the economy, the unemployment rate. Unemployed is defined as anyone who is looking for a job but does not have one. This is measured through surveys and government assistance programs. The Bureau of Labor Statistics separated us into employed, unemployed, and not in the labor force. Not in the labor force is when you are technically eligible for the labor force, but are not and have no interest. So say, for example, if you're a full-time student or retired, you are not in the labor force. In 2019, the unemployment rate was around 4%, which is quite solid. In 2020, it was 8%. And this varies further broken down by race and gender and education. The last measure of our economy is its inflation rate. This is the increase in price level over time, aka how the cost of living changes.
Have you ever heard your grandfather say, "When I was a kid, a burger cost a nickel"? Or seen a vintage sign selling a Corvette for $1,000? Boy, would it have been sweet to live in that time, right? Actually, because of inflation, it would be pretty much the same. Inflation is the overall rise in prices of goods and services in an economy.
This is calculated through something called the CPI, the Consumer Price Index of household goods. It takes, say, a basket of what goods can be priced at today and compares it to the year before, and on average of all those household items, that's what indicates inflation. Inflation is common. As prices go up, wages generally go up. It's also a good indicator to what items and wages should be priced at. For example, while minimum wage was bumped up to $7.25 in 2009, adjusted for inflation, it should be $9 today. Hyperinflation is not normal. This creates uncertainty in the supply market, in the job market, and in the household. A strong economy is likely to have low inflation, which is less than 2%. I want to first talk about the health of our economy because our GDP, inflation, and unemployment rate are all factors of our standard of living, but they largely depend on how we interact with other nations' economies and their choices too. This is globalization. Globalization is about the interconnectedness of people and businesses across the world that leads to global cultural, political, and economic integration. It is the ability to move and communicate easily with others all over the world in order to conduct business internationally. To put simply, it's why you can buy strawberries in December. It's why you have someone from another country troubleshooting your Wi-Fi problem. It's how Delaware became an offshore haven for international crime lords. Our goods and services are now produced on a global scale. One of the effects of globalization is that it promotes and increases interactions between different regions and populations around the globe. As technological innovations made travel, shipments, and communication easier, the goal was if our economies depend on each other, there would be less war. We now have imports, what's shipped to us, and exports, the goods shipped out, trading all over the globe, forming a body. Each nation plays a vital role in keeping our body functioning. And to extend this metaphor, if the United States as an arm starts beating on China as our legs, we are just hurting ourselves. The main US exports to other countries are capital goods like machinery, vehicles, computers, while one of the main things we import are consumer goods, phones, clothing, and pharmaceuticals. Taxes on these goods are called tariffs. Instead of bombing another country, these days we just raise tariffs on each other, hurting another nation's wallet and creating a trade war.
The world's leading superpowers are locking horns.
Game on here. A trade war between the United States and China is here.
Over the past 16 months, America and China have been trading blows through tariffs on goods.
We are looking at a reality that has, a 25% tariff on every single product that would come in from China.
U.S. President Joe Biden squeezing Russia's economy even tighter, now banning imports of big-ticket Russian products like caviar and diamonds, and stopping exports of U.S. luxury goods, high-end cars and watches, desired by President Vladimir Putin's billionaire backers.
They support Putin. They steal from the Russian people.
Deutsche Bank has now joined hundreds of companies across the globe pulling its business out of Russia. But Putin continues to brush off the impact of sanctions as he ramps up deadly attacks in Ukraine. President Biden still has more economic weapons he could launch at Russia, including directly sanctioning its stock market and the country's largest state-owned banks. But actions have ripple effects, including skyrocketing gas prices in the U.S. after America stopped buying Russian oil.
Can you get me a loan?
It was over $50.
Airline ticket prices are rapidly rising too as the cost of jet fuel surges. And the U.S. is facing another crisis from the war, dozens of Ukrainian refugees flying to Mexico to try and get into America.
When tariffs are raised too high, though, that trade war ends up impacting our economy, what we buy, and our job market too. So some side benefits of this system of globalization are it creates a worldwide market, promoting free trade anywhere, creating jobs in other nations. For consumers, this does drive prices of goods down, but pay and regulations in the U.S. are not in place in Vietnam, Somalia, or Myanmar. So businesses have their goods produced and assembled in other nations that are then shipped and sold to the United States. But more on that point in just a little bit. Finally, sharing financial interests creates an influx of information between two countries who might not have been connected before. Politics and culture adapt to new systems that create a more monolithic culture. Now, a few costs or critiques of globalization. Primarily, the exploitation of human labor. There is more emphasis on benefits for business instead of people. A corporation is still gaining much more than any person in labor or buying the product. For example, take the cost breakdown of a Nike shoe. Sneaker companies such as Nike and Adidas outsource production to more than 1 million workers in factories in China. and other countries around the world where the labor costs are relatively cheap. Nike's cost breakdown includes approximately $27.50 per pair for the Chinese factory labor. The breakdown is then about $17 for overhead costs and taxes, but then it's sold to a store for another $50, then ending up in a $100 shoe. Our $5 shirts from H&M, our coffee and chocolate are products of child labor or slave wages as well. Safety standards are ignored to produce cheap goods that can also increase human trafficking. Multinational companies target the countries with the weakest labor laws to make the most profit. Another con is if you rely too much on another nation for goods, this global supply chain creates dangerous dependence if something goes wrong on that supply chain. For example, as a single ship ran aground in the Suez Canal, shutting down traffic in both directions, international commerce confronted a monumental traffic ban with potentially grave consequences.
The ship plugging the choke point that funnels 30% of the global seaborne trade. 400 meters long and weighing more than 200,000 tons, the Ever Given has become an immovable barrier shutting down Egypt's Suez Canal. With around $10 billion in trade at stake every day, diggers, tugboats, dredgers, and a team of Dutch ship salvagers are working day and night to dislodge the vessel.
The fact that one mishap could create fresh chaos from Los Angeles to Rotterdam to Shanghai underscored the extent to which modern commerce has come to revolve around true global supply chains. Each day costs a $10 billion stalemate in trade. The last con I want to address is the lack of environmental protections for other nations creates an unsustainable system. These multinational companies, in order to make the most profit, try to also go to nations with the weakest environment regulations. In fact, greenhouse gas emissions have grown 60% in the past 30 years, and the next time you're in Los Angeles, take a deep breath. A significant portion of the pollution you'll breathe into your lungs comes from across the Pacific Ocean. A quarter of daily sulfide pollution in the US comes from China's exports. This is what we call negative externalities. The products of our labor have other consequences that could then cost us much more than we ever initially imagined. There is good that comes from globalization. There is good in seeing us as a whole community and learning about different cultures. There is good in being able to sit comfortably in clothes we ordered a week ago. Yet the protections and regulations happening here in the United States, even if they're small, must be demanded by our trade partners too. But if you could imagine how difficult changing law for one nation is, imagine creating new trade agreements between multiple nations against corporations. Now, where do we fit into all of this? No one's exempt from the cost of globalization. I'm talking to you from my iPhone perched up with the script on my laptop, on this couch and these clothes that are made and assembled from China to Mexico. One of the difficult parts of teaching social studies is the amount of depressing stories and systems behind it all. You're aware of that. If you're feeling depressed or overwhelmed, that's understandable. While I say you have power, you might feel like, what power? And if I do have power, should I feel guilty about the practices of Pepsi, Amazon, Nike, and how they relate to my government? What do you do when there's so much bad in the world and you're just trying to get through high school? You do what you can. It is a privilege to be in high school and not in a sweatshop. It is a privilege to be able to communicate to you in this very isolating time. But it's also a privilege to have wealth and the choice to shop more ethically. Ethical shopping is the practice of buying from businesses that align with your personal values. That's the broad definition. Values can include environmental sustainability, anything local, animal-free, or protections for workers. Ethics differ by person. And even talking about this can create a dilemma. Sure, we might believe in all those in theory, but due to limited money, availability, or time, our ethics take a backseat just in order to survive. While we live in the United States, many of us do not have the option to shop at farmers markets or buy the handmade clothing at a local boutique. So while we might want to help local businesses or choose the healthiest or most sustainable option, our wallets say otherwise. Here are a few tips to help you shop ethically on a budget. Number 1, prioritize what values you look for in a company. This is called a hierarchy of values. You might have a lot of standards, but some you might value more than others. Chances are no company encases all of your values, so when you have choices to shop, in order to not overwhelm yourself, decide for yourself the options between local, sustainable, cruelty-free, etc. 2, shop secondhand. This is considered the most affordable option in terms of buying clothes at thrift shops, furniture at a Goodwill, or looking for something on Craigslist. You can give objects, no matter how small, a second home.
Many of you feel happy for this lamp. That's not crazy. Reusing things is much better.
3, choose slower online deliveries. If you have to, this requires more work and planning on our end, but to avoid the quick conveniences of Amazon, if you have to find an item, go to the actual source and see their shipping options. Or, if you can, buy local. There are treasures of local shops and restaurants in any community, except Delaware. And we'll have a chance to share and promote a few in class, but not only is this more eco-friendly, but you're helping out our local community too. Oh, also credit unions. Opening an account with a credit union provides loans at better rates for houses and businesses in your community too. Doing all of this does require research, and there are plenty of sources you can use and share. One is the Ethical Consumer that breaks down different products you can purchase, what to look for, and then has links to suggested sites too. Of course, all of this depends on your own means and what is most practical for you. But if you do have a business or suggestion you believe in, share it. I talk so much about textbook laws, cases, terms, and theories, but this is what can create change in a community. The political and economic landscape is constantly changing, and it's the individual who makes that change possible. In this last lecture, I just want to say, have a bit of hope. In these past few years, we've changed what community means. And even though this comes with newfound tension, I'm hoping you feel how much excitement and optimism I have for you and your future. I love teaching government and economics because it's asking what role do we as people have in systems and histories larger than us. It asks, are we a tale of progress or stagnation, of hope or despair? And stuck in this story is you, grappling with the world of individual choices in a time and place you did not create. There are days where events of the world can make us feel lost and sick. There are days we don't know how we're going to get through. I know I've experienced many with you, but somehow we show up. We talk, we sit in silence, and even through all this pain and confusion, what gives me peace is seeing you there with me. What gives me hope is once again you. I'm asking you to hold on to hope. Allow yourself to be open to new communities, experiences, and just know, wherever you are in the future, you're still connected to me right here. Thank you for watching. Godspeed.